Hello everyone. The year of death, disasters and despair. This is the characteristic of 2020, given by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. Due to the pandemic, 2 million people died, 500 million lost their jobs, and natural disasters cost the world $210 billion. What's more, the economic recession, lockdown and paralysis of international trade threaten to turn into a new problem – mass famine in poor countries. The UN calculated that in order to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe, it is necessary to send at least 35 billion to aid programs immediately. But there is nowhere to take them. States have already spent $19 trillion on the fight against the pandemic, starting printing presses everywhere. So Guterres actually has to admit that the organization he heads is good for nothing, limiting to calls to move from death to recovery, from disaster to reconstruction, from despair to hope. In general, all problems can now be blamed on the pandemic. It was the virus that spoiled all our plans. It was the virus that interrupted the triumphant march of market globalization, which had brought welfare and prosperity to the world. But in fact, it is certainly not the case. The number of starving people in the world has been growing throughout the years. The main cause of famine is not natural disasters, wars or viruses at all, but the market economy, which demonstrates extreme inefficiency in the distribution of wealth and does not allow humanity to solve the problem of hunger finally, although this could be done today. Yes, in the 21st century, people on our planet are still starving. The number of people suffering from severe malnutrition goes to hundreds of millions. But even some 15-20 years ago, many thought that this problem would be solved in the near future. The number of hungry people declined during the economic growth of the first decade of the millennium and reached 629 million, after which the trend reversed. During the period that economists call the Great Stagnation, this figure increased by 60 million. And the UN predicts that by 2030, the number of hungry people will reach 841 million. That is, 1 in 10 inhabitants of the planet will not be able to satisfy the basic need for food. Moreover, it should be kept in mind that this forecast was built in 2019 and does not take into account the impact of the pandemic. The latest calculations show an even more depressing picture. According to the negative forecast of the UN Food Organization, the world's starving population will grow by a third, and its number will exceed 900 million people. This is more than the whole population of Europe. Half of all hungry people live in the Asian region. A third is in Africa. According to forecasts, they will change places by 2030. In Asia, they even expect a reduction of hungry population, primarily due to China, which, through active government intervention in the economy, managed to eliminate extreme poverty in 2020. At the same time, in Africa, where the influence of European capital is strong, the states, as a rule, are not able to perform the function of a regulator. The number of hungry people will grow by 70%. This means that by 2030, 1 in 4 Africans will not have access to food. And this is only data on severe hunger, which is caused by desperate food shortages. Alongside with that, there has been a rise in the number of people suffering from periodic malnutrition, poor food quality and lack of vitamins. In 2019, there were 1,300 million such people in the world. In this way, in the 21st century, 2 billion people, a quarter of the world's population, are deprived of food security. And if you raise the bar to the level of a healthy diet, when a person's food includes not only a sufficient amount of calories and nutrients, but is also balanced in variety, then it turns out that such a luxury is not affordable for every second inhabitant of the Earth, almost 4 billion people. So that you understand the true scale of the problem, Russia is one of the countries in which, according to the UN, there is nothing wrong with food. Although domestic studies show that the diet of 30% of Russians does not correspond to the norms of energy value. Malnutrition causes acute health problems. 52 million children under 5 years of age suffer from wasting, with 17 million from severe wasting. This accounts for half of all child deaths. Poor, unbalanced nutrition results in stunting in 155 million children, and 41 million are overweight or obese. However, in the minds of the men in the street, all these problems are somewhere far away and do not concern them. What, they say, do I care about starving Africans? But such judgments are superficial and short-sighted. The problem of hunger on the planet affects everyone and affects the life of each of us. The most valuable resource in the modern economy is not gold, oil or bitcoins, but human potential. By not using it, society deprives itself of the opportunity to accelerate technological progress, develop culture and science. The fight against incurable diseases, space exploration, environmental protection. All these problems would be solved much faster and more efficiently if half of the world's population were not excluded from civilized life, not even being able to eat properly. But how to solve the problem of hunger? First, we need to understand its causes. And of course, this phenomenon is multifactorial. The simplest explanation is poor natural conditions and natural disasters that do not allow residents of poor countries to develop agriculture. Another popular point of view lies in the socio-cultural plane. Well, the institutions there are bad, the people are faulty, they are lazy, uncivilized, backward, they do not know how to work, and therefore they are starving, unlike civilized Europeans and Americans. However, the economic analysis of the poorest countries shows that their agriculture can hardly be called underdeveloped. For example, let's take 30 countries that are in the last lines of the global rating Common Determinant of Hunger. On the map, they are painted in yellow and red, which means respectively a high level and a critical level of hunger. Despite growing number of hungry people, many of these countries are major suppliers of food to foreign markets. Since 2008, their total food exports have almost doubled, exceeding $70 billion in 2019, which is comparable to the global arms market. Meanwhile, food exports grow faster pace relative to other product groups. During the same period, its share increased from 8 to almost 12% of exports. Due to globalization, poor countries have been included in the system of international division of labor. They joined the ranks of capitalist periphery, becoming a raw material appendage of the Western world and its satellites. Researcher Vandana Shiva, in her book India Divided, calls hunger in the country an inevitable result of globalization. It has transformed food from a basic human need, which everyone has the right to satisfy, into a globally traded commodity. As a result of globalization, agricultural producers in India were deprived of the opportunity to consume the products they were growing. The environmental conditions of agricultural industry deteriorated significantly, and the lands were alienated by corporations. One of the social consequences of this transformation of the national economy was the suicides of Indian farmers. Thus, from 1997 to 2005, more than 160,000 farmers in India took their own lives. A real epidemic of suicides swept through those Indian states where farmers grew cotton for export and became hostages of the monopoly on seeds. In India, the supply of cotton seeds passed into the hands of global producers, such as Monsanto, which quickly absorbed local seed companies. India's agricultural policy became focused exclusively on foreign markets and not on meeting the domestic needs of the population. This, in turn, created conditions for hunger in the most vulnerable communities. Meanwhile, families living below the poverty line receive much less food aid than ever in colonial period. So, if in 1877 the state subsidized food for people engaged in heavy physical labor in the amount of 1,627 calories per day, with a diet of 3,900 calories necessary for an adult Indian man, then in the era of globalization such subsidies range from 100 to 200 calories, which does not meet the elementary needs for maintaining human life. The neighbor of India is Pakistan. In rating of the Common Determinant of Hunger, it ranks 88th out of 107 and belongs to the group of countries with a high level of hunger. In 2019, food exports exceeded $26 billion. The main crop of Pakistan is wheat. In 2019, its harvest was 28 million tons, more than in all of Africa, and almost as much as in South America. Pakistan ranks 6th in the world of wheat exports, 4th in milk, 5th in sugar, 10th in rice, and 18th in potatoes. The country also sells onions, oranges, apricots, and corn. The main direction of food exports is the rich countries of Europe and the United States, China, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia as well. The Gulf countries are showing particular interest in Pakistani agriculture, acquiring the most fertile lands. Other plots of land belong mainly to the Pakistani nobility, who have been in control of it since feudal times. As a result, only 5% of owners control 2/3 of the farmland. At the same time, half of rural households are landless. For tens of millions of people, this means either semi-slave labor, literally for food on the plantations of large landlords, or the same enslaving conditions for leasing land, which forces them to part with more than half of the harvest as payment. But producers and exporters thus get the opportunity to minimize costs and supply goods to wealthy buyers abroad on beneficial terms. Another example is Somalia. It belongs to the group of countries with a critical level of hunger. Thus, the outbreak of hunger from 2010 to 2012 swept off the lives of 260,000 people there. This did not prevent Somali business from withdrawing more than $1 billion worth of agricultural products from the country. Somalia's main export is beef farming. Sheep and goats are raised for sale, and millions of heads are sent to the Gulf countries every year. Halal Somali meat is especially appreciated by Arab sheikhs for its sweetish taste and dietary goodness. Another major export item of Somalia is fish, which is sold to Turkey, South Korea and the Arab Emirates. The National Fishing Company is one of the largest private enterprises in Somalia. The way it works in the market is a typical example of monopsony. The company is actually the only buyer to whom local fishermen can sell their catch. When there isn't any state control, the company lowers the purchase prices for fish to a minimum. To make ends meet, fishermen have to go fishing in a storm and save on everything, including equipment and boats, most of which have been handed down for many decades. The result is injuries and the frequent death of fishermen doing work. To put it plainly, there are many more examples in such countries. The proximity of hunger with the export of food is not at all the result of accidental imbalance in the market mechanism. For a capitalist economy, this is a completely normal state of affairs. Business is not interested in people's problems, and it will sell the goods to the one who pays more. For example, the Russian Empire, which the conservatives, nostalgic for the crunch of a French baguette, longingly call the breadbasket of Europe, was in a similar situation. Yes, Tsarist Russia fed the Germans with bread in the same way that Somalia provides the Arabs with meat, but at the same time the Russian peasantry lived from hand to mouth. On this topic, we recommend watching a video on the bad signature. Among all the causes of hunger in the modern world, the UN highlights the monetary one. The graph shows how the prevalence of malnutrition, vertical axis, increases along with the increase in the financial inaccessibility of a healthy diet. It may seem that the prices of food in poor countries are very high, and therefore the population cannot afford it. To test this hypothesis, we can refer to the indicator of the nominal rate of protection. It represents the deviation of local prices for goods from the world average due to the peculiarities of the market and the regulation by the state. A negative value indicates that prices are below average. A positive value indicates that they are higher. As can be seen from the data in the table, food prices in the poor countries are far below the world average. However, this is not well for local residents. Low prices are the result of extremely low labor costs, as well as the artificial lowering of purchase prices by large corporations from local suppliers. In addition, this picture clearly shows that states do not protect the interests of producers by means of tax and customs policies, in contrast to high-income countries, where farmers sell their products at a price higher than the global average. As a result, food prices in poor countries are low only for a foreign buyer, and they remain unaffordable for the local population, since people's incomes are even lower. Thus, globalization and the bondage of poor countries to the transnational corporations is becoming one of the key causes of hunger in the modern world. Free market relations, as is typically the case, allow the strong and the rich to fatten on the poor and the weak. But the problem here lies not only in the moral and ethical plane. First of all, it reflects the inefficiency of the market mechanisms in the distribution of goods. While 700 million people on the planet go hungry and 4 billion cannot afford quality food, about a third of the world's food is lost every year. According to the UN, in 2018, 1.3 billion tons of food was irretrievably lost. Schematically, these losses can be depicted as follows. First, from the total harvest, the products that are not intended for human nutrition are subtracted, for example, feed, seeds, energy. Then, from the resulting volume, the edible part is selected. We take it for 100% of the food products produced in the world. Some of them are lost at the harvesting stage. Another part is lost during storage, transportation and processing. Then a part is lost at the retail stage, that is, in supermarkets that could not sell the goods. And finally, some more food is lost in the process of consumption, for example, when a can of spat forgotten in the fridge begins to show signs of life.
О, Боже. Офигеть. Там же затерянная цивилизация.
All those were subtracted and combined under the single concept of food loss and food waste, where the losses include what was lost before getting to the supermarket or restaurant, and everything that is after refers to waste. For example, in the United States, the losses and waste of vegetables and fruits make up as much as 66%. Moreover, most of it is related to sale and consumption. In Europe, 36% of fish and seafood are irretrievably lost, again, mainly at the stage of retail and consumption. It is not difficult to explain such wastefulness. A significant part of food is imported to the Western world from poor regions, where, as was shown above, prices are well below the world average, which means that there is no economic need to protect it from spoilage. As a result, the following picture is formed on the regional context. Per capita, food losses during production, storage, transportation and processing in poor and rich regions are approximately equal. This is due to the limits of modern technology. But in terms of food waste, rich countries are many times ahead of poor regions. For example, the United States utilizes at the stage of sale and consumption 16 times more food than in the southern part of the African continent. For example, the marketing strategies of the largest retail chains do not allow placing ugly vegetables on the store shelves. This is the name for those fruits and vegetables which exterior is not attractive enough to be placed in sales areas, or the consumers themselves do not want to buy strange-looking carrots. This leads to the fact that, for example, in the UK, 25% of apples, 20% of onions and 13% of potatoes are sent to scrap. The standards of fast food restaurants also require the destruction of usable products. For example, at McDonald's, a hamburger that has been on the shelf for more than 10 minutes is sent to the trash. As a result, companies are not interested in saving food from losses, both at the production and consumption stage. It is cheaper to throw away food than take care of saving it. In addition, food waste can be caused by traditional market problems, such as the crisis of overproduction. Destroying products that have not found demand is a common thing in market economy. At the height of the pandemic, we were able to enjoy such shots again.
Farmers have to destroy their crops because demand has plunged so dramatically. Rosa, tell us what's happening there.
It's actually happening right now. Take a look. What this tractor is doing is they're literally destroying zucchini and squash. This has been devastating for farmers here in Florida. The owner of this farm is Sam Arcusio. His family has been working this land since 1948, and he said that this is devastating. It all started a few weeks ago when schools and restaurants started closing and the supply chains got completely severed. He says that since then, about 70% of his acreage has had to be destroyed.
In short, hunger on our planet is not only a technical phenomenon, but also an economic one. Due to the commodity-money relations and profit as the only goal of any economic activity, first food is withdrawn from the poor regions, and then some of it is destroyed. This leads to a senseless waste of natural resources, fertilizers, water, human labor, and does not allow to solve the problem of hunger, despite the fact that today the world produces enough food to provide it to everyone in need. The world community, represented by the UN, regularly expresses concern about both the increase in hunger and the formation of huge food waste. But not having the courage to name the true cause of the prevailing problems, countless experts traditionally urge us to start with ourselves. Buy only the necessary products and store them correctly. Do not be squeamish about ugly fruits and vegetables. Do not throw away food leftovers, but put them in the refrigerator. And also do not forget about a valuable life hack. When organizing a party, order food 10–15% less than you need for the planned number of guests. This way you can not only save money, but also convince yourself that you are helping hungry African children. However, it is clear that such measures cannot solve the problem of hunger while remaining in the paradigm of a market economy. Unequal exchange and global exploitation, the formation of monopolies and monopsonies, overproduction and inflation are not just a consequence of the greed of corporations and the irrepressible appetites of their owners, although, of course, they cannot be absolved of responsibility. The market is simply unable to work otherwise, and these problems are not at all an accidental deviation, but a necessary condition for capital accumulation, the main law of the market economy, according to which its reproduction occurs.
Кстати, об одной из сторон такого явления мы рассказывали в ролике об эксплуатации Африки европейским капиталом через финансовые каналы. Ссылка будет на экране.
It is possible to solve the problem of hunger on Earth, and thereby take a step along the path of social and scientific progress even today. The productive forces are developed enough to make food shortages a thing of the past. But to do this, it is necessary to abandon the archaic market relations that have long lost their progressive beginning. Replace free pricing with transfer pricing, socialize monopolists, and direct their profits not to fill the private pocket, but, for example, to develop technologies that will reduce food losses during transportation and storage. In short, Carthage must be destroyed.